Oh, so we're talking about
Shit and stuff. Hello, and welcome to Middleish, the podcast about moderation in all things. I am Michael Gray,
I am Erin Green.
and this is a mini pod.
This is a mini pod, just
Mini
a little one.
pod, mini pod, little bitty mini pod.
We have to be careful though, because we get going and our mini pods start turning into full-length episodes. So
Most of our mini pods are like 40 minutes.
we'll keep it reined in. We'll keep it reined in today,
Yeah,
everyone.
we'll do our asbestos. Yeah.
Yeah, but we appreciate you being here, and I have appreciated all the engagement on this topic because we are talking about fear-mongering on social media for parents and people taking it like centered around kids. What are you doing to your kid? How are you poisoning your child? And
Right.
I mean, as if parents don't have enough to worry about with raising another human or humans, plural, and handling their own lives. You have to go and make them feel like shit for
Right.
giving their kid goldfish for a snack. So that's what we're talking about today. And we've gotten a lot of interest on this topic.
Yeah. It's funny because I mean, I am a parent and I coach a lot of parents, and the amount of like stress that can exist around just like giving your kids some food is
Yeah.
bananas. Like
Yeah.
I mean, some of the conversations I have with some of my clients who are parents, it's just like, man, like it doesn't have to be this hard. Like you don't need to look at the nutrition label at all. Just give them something. It's gonna be fine. Like,
It's going to be fine.
I
Love that.
promise they're gonna be fine.
They're going to be okay.
Yeah.
And I also want to clarify that in no way are we advocating to just ignore any, nutrition knowledge or efforts for your child to enjoy, nourishing foods. That's not the point of this. The point
Right.
is to address those influencers and the messaging that parents
Right.
often get that is like, I mean, it really does present the idea that if you feed your child this,
Mm-hmm.
you're a bad parent. You don't care about their health. You're
Yeah, you're
poisoning them.
killing
And
them.
that needs to be
Yeah, it's
brought down a few notches.
yeah, it's one of those things, it's like it's so harmful and terrible, but it's also so ridiculous and silly.
Yeah.
Like it's such a strange combination of like serious and outlandish. Like
Yeah.
it's very much both. And so I think, it's easy for like, Aaron and I think who sit in these spaces a lot to just be like, oh my gosh, this is silly. But I have to remind myself a lot, while it is silly, it's also something that is portrayed from an expert point of view very frequently. And so and I think I can speak for Aaron here too. Like we don't hold any judgment around this at all. We get it, but at the same time, it's like, man, we really need to um, how I want to say this, like we really need to do the work that we need to do to shed a lot of these things because we are, if we don't, we're actively handing down the same things that were handed down to us, right? Even if they're different, they're the same. And there are these beliefs that that diet culture perpetuates, right? Like fear of foods, fear of certain ingredients, like obsession with calories and nutrition and number of meals and all these things that we then are just kind of handing down to our
Yeah.
kids in maybe different ways, but it's the same stuff. And if we don't really address the stuff and kind of shed light on some of these really harmful like accounts and beliefs and messages, then we're setting our kids up to have just the same struggles that we've had, if not more
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. And I think a big part of that is recognizing how one's upbringing and that influence has
Hmm.
molded your approach to eating. And, a lot of parents will, like adults will come to me and be like, they're aware of all the messaging, but they don't really stop to examine where that emerged in their life, like
Hmm.
when that began, and it begins in childhood. And
Absolutely.
once you do that work of kind of digging back into your own childhood as an adult, the things that were really great, maybe you had really great influences with food and nutrition and you don't have, a lot of those issues. You can really identify that and strengthen that and model that for your kids, but then also being aware of like, where did some of this like messed up kind of,
Yeah.
talk come from?
Yeah.
I also want to acknowledge those, um a lot of them are health practitioners like pediatricians or people who work with kids, teachers, um who see, man, our kids are eating too much processed food. They don't have access to fruits and they don't eat these foods. They're not getting them at home. um I want to say that I see you and I hear you
Hmm.
and I totally respect the urgency with which you are trying to instill, health education, nutrition education into families and children. I really think that's a different approach than what Michael and I have been railing against. But I also want to just caution that because a lot of times I picture it like the pendulum swinging, right? So the pendulum is way too far over into one realm where this kid doesn't have much variety. They're not getting, ample nutrients from different food groups. Maybe they're super picky eater. Maybe the parents are time crunched, and so they do rely on like heavily processed foods most of the time instead of just some of the time.
Hmm.
And there, I see these practitioners and educators and people taking care of kids be like, oh my gosh, we have to fight against this, we have to get kids eating healthier, we have to increase access to fruits and vegetables and fresh foods and educate parents more. I i get that,
Hmm.
but then the pendulum could swing completely to the other side. And all of a sudden, you're teaching kids that this food is good, this food is bad. I've
Right.
had too much of this. I can't have that now. I earned this because I did something good or I exercised a lot today. We quote burned it all. You can have ice cream. All
Right.
of a sudden, the pendulum swings over to a different realm that is
Yeah.
also not healthy. So we
Right.
have to acknowledge that, like, this is why we have a Middleish podcast because
This is why we're here.
the extremes are not healthy. So I just
Yeah.
wanted to put that out there too, that, I do understand where some of this messaging comes from a very like helpful and nurturing place, but we have to be really careful about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And as a parent, I understand this like desire, like we want what's best for our kids in all the ways, right? And just health, physically, mentally, emotionally, we want them to have good relationships at school and do well and all this stuff. We want what's best for our kids, for sure. And I think a lot of times it's easy, for parents to get kind of caught up in like, well, what's best in a very narrow scope, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
what's best, like sure, do fruits and vegetables hold a higher nutrient value than ice cream? Sure. Like that's gonna have more benefits for your body as far as what it takes from those foods. But if we're only looking at like what's quote unquote best in those ways, then we don't build out a child and a belief system who can navigate the world that we live in, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
within reality. And reality is there are going to be popsicles and ice cream and cookies and cake and pizza and juice. And like there's going to be all these things.
Mm-hmm.
And why not like look instead of a very narrow scope of what's best, right? Like what has the lowest calorie option and what has the most nutrient, the highest nutrient option, whatever. What about like how they just view food on the whole, like their relationship with all of the options of food, right? And how do I have things that I enjoy as a part of a well-rounded diet? How do I make
Mm-hmm.
sure I eat fruits and vegetables as part of a well-rounded diet, right? It's not just one or the other. It's good interactions, good relationships with both, a trust in their body to tell them when they're full. I mean, all these things, as opposed to just fruits, vegetables, nothing processed. How about like, what is my entire relationship with food and eating in my body? And what is that like? And let's build that out in the best way. Because I
Yeah.
think if you're going to do that, you have to have all the fun stuff too, as a part of just the way things are, and
Yeah.
learn to self-regulate that stuff rather than, okay, let me tick boxes and count calories so I know what I can and can't eat.
Yep. And exactly what you're explaining is acknowledging that we eat for other reasons than
Mm-hmm.
just the nutrients.
Mm-hmm.
We eat foods for lots of different reasons. And it's really important for children to be brought up in a world, exactly like you said, that they can navigate all of those other, joys and pleasures and social constructs around food. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, I would like to talk about some of the phrases that parents can use to help with this and some of the
Let's
approaches
do it.
parents can take.
Yeah, let's do that.
Um, because we talked a lot about what not to do last time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but one of my favorites, something you just mentioned was like the relationship with body and getting kids to tune into their bodies. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's so powerful and important. And one of my favorite things to encourage parents to do is just simply talk with their kids about
Yeah.
what are the signs that you're hungry? What are the signs that you're full? And what are some in between signs? It doesn't always have to live on a teeter totter. You're either hungry or full. There's
Mm-hmm.
some in between in there. So, what's your tummy telling you?
Yeah.
Or is your body telling you you've had enough? Are you done? Could you eat a little more if you wanted to? Do you want any more? Like just kind of
Mm-hmm.
asking them some of that or describe what you are feeling in your own body in front
Yeah.
of your kids.
Yeah.
Like, man, my tummy's starting to feel full. I think I'm going to slow down here. Or maybe, I'm done eating. I'm going to save the rest of this for,
Mm-hmm.
lunch tomorrow or whatever it is. But that just really creates the safe space for your child to
Yeah.
acknowledge what's happening within their own bodies.
Yeah. And I think such an important way to approach that is just like let it be what it is, right?
Mm,
Like I think sometimes like we want to like help our kids, listen to their bodies or understand their fullness cues, but it's like we put a lot of pressure on doing that right at first. And it's like this is an exploration, right? Like this, I think you have to approach the stuff as like, let's try some things and see what we find. And then we
yeah.
can we can talk about that and we can build on. This isn't like a, hey, let's fix this. This is something you are continually doing, I think. It's not like you say these a few times and then, okay, my kid has a good relationship with food. I think it's something that you have to sort of perpetually be doing. And I really like, just like that simple question of what's your tummy telling you, you know?
Hmm.
And I think we talked about this. I don't remember if it was on the episode or just as we were talking off air, but Sophie um, recently had been like kind of getting a lot of sugary stuff throughout the day and having
Yeah.
these tummy aches for a couple of days in a row. And so we talked about that as she was like one day just like going to get some fruit snacks or something. And I said, hey, just today, just remember that the last few days when you've had a lot more sugary stuff, your tummy is hurt, right? Like your tummy is kind of telling you, maybe this is too much. So just be aware of that, right? Like today. And just remember not only what is your tummy telling you now, but what has your tummy told you in the past, you know?
Hmm.
And that's been a big one for me. I love food and I can easily overeat, like
That's why we're friends, Michael.
easily, right? Like I love it. But I have to remind myself, like, man, like when I go back for thirds, like
Yep.
45 minutes later, I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
like
That
I
pleasure is
hurt
short-lived.
now.
Like,
Yeah,
okay, that didn't work very well.
yeah. So just like letting happen, letting what happens happen, right? Like it
Hmm.
was okay that she had a tummy ache and a super whole bunch of sugar for a few days. Like that hasn't damaged or ruined anything. She's fine and she's going to be fine. But we got to use that as an opportunity of like, oh, so let's pay
Hmm.
attention to what's happened after we've done those things and let's apply that to the future. And I think honestly, just that, like, I think so often, like, especially like how we were raised, our generation, it like there was no paying attention to with whether you're full or not. That's what's
No.
on your plate and you eat what's on your plate because
Yeah.
I have decided how hungry you are in this moment, right? As a parent.
Right.
And so this is
Right.
what yeah, it's like, ugh. Um, but I think just even beginning to get kids to just recognize, oh, my body's communicating. right? It tells me when I'm hungry. It tells me when I'm full. It tells me when I've had maybe too much of something.
Yeah.
And I can listen to it and I can trust it.
Yeah. There's no
Is
pressure like to
no,
eat more or to ignore it or to
no,
override it.
no.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, listen to your body. And okay, if you do it wrong, okay, right? Like,
Yep. We
like,
learn. That's
yeah,
how we learn.
yeah, using Sophie
Yeah.
again as an example, there are times where she's like, I'm full, when really she just wants to go play.
Yeah.
She's not really full. So it's like, okay, let's talk about this. Like,
Yeah.
it's going to be bedtime soon. Do you have enough food in your belly to get you to bedtime? Or are you going to be
Right.
hungry again in 15 minutes?
Right.
Like, let's think through this.
Yeah.
But just like bringing that awareness is huge and key.
I think it's important to recognize that the parents are the menu planners. So I've talked about Ellen Satter before, and I will link her division of responsibility in the show notes because I think it's really helpful for parents to just put some framework to navigating this. Parents, you are the menu planners. You get to decide what, when, and where. The
Mhm.
children get to decide if they eat it or how much. So when I talk about food inclusion, so one of the questions I get from parents is, well, how do I get my kids to eat more of this stuff or to, eat healthier? Well, you present that in the environment. Like
Yeah,
you
exposure.
plan the menu that way. And one of the things I recommended a parent talk with their kid about, their very small child, like 3-year-old, is like all the foods are invited to a party, okay? And they all have to have room on the dance floor to party. So you can't just fill the dance floor with a certain kind of food because then there's no room for the other foods to come in
Mhm.
and join the party. And so just kind of explaining it in very simple terms. And I didn't use any kind of a hierarchy there. There's no food that's better or deserves more time on the dance floor than others. You're just allowing space for all foods.
Mhm.
And that can be a really neutral message for kids if they are like, really steering toward the sugar. Um, awesome to talk about body cues. How did that feel? Also awesome to say, well, we need to make room for some other foods as well, just to make sure that you're getting everything you need. And so
Mhm.
these foods, we haven't had as many of these today, or we can have more, whatever, cotton
Mhm.
candy tomorrow, or whatever it is. So I think just really creating food neutrality and talking about we need to include all foods is a
Mhm.
really good message that kids can grasp. They can get that.
Yeah. Well, and I think just too, like letting them like have exposure to food, like so I hated broccoli as a kid, hated it. And we had broccoli. It seemed like every meal. I'm sure it wasn't, but it sure seemed like that as a kid. Like every single meal every day.
All you see is
Yeah.
broccoli.
But and I mean, I hated it. I hated the taste. I hated the texture. I hated everything about it. And I had a really hard time getting it down. My family would tease me, and my mom would say, like, we could sell tickets to watch you eat broccoli because you put on such a show. And so with this approach, like this worry of like my kid needs to get this food now, right? Like they need to eat broccoli, they need to get these vegetables now, they need to eat them. And the pressure around that, like I understand wanting your kid to eat vegetables because they're good for them, sure. But that had a real like negative effect for me
Yeah.
because now at 42, I love broccoli, but I didn't try it again until I was 37,
Mm,
you know, because
yep.
I was just like, I hate it. I hate it. I hated the experience of what it tasted like, the texture. I hated sitting at the dinner table and having my family laugh at me as I'm choking down food I can't stand because I can't leave the table until it's gone, or I could, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, that's a traumatic memory to be
yeah,
attached to food, for
yeah.
sure.
And so what happens is with all this pressure around a certain food, it backfired, right? Like I very well may have liked broccoli at 20. I don't know. But you know, but because of the way it was presented and the pressure around it, it really backfired. And I think again, we have to look at like, are we building a long-term, big picture, good relationship with food? And that allows you to try stuff and not like it, and then come back to it again and try later. Because if you have to try new food and eat all of it that's on your plate, versus if you can try new food and if you don't like it, that's fine. We'll try it again later. which situation is a kid going to come back to and try again, right? Without the pressure of I have to eat all of this. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I just think it's really important we look at that big picture. And
I liked your, in our podcast prep, you talked about like allowing children to interact with food.
mhm,
So, adults would never be expected. Like you travel to a foreign country and you're
mhm,
handed a food that looks and smells completely unfamiliar. Maybe it has ingredients you can't
right,
pronounce. Maybe it's things that you just have never seen before. And,
chemicals.
it would be pretty effing scary for a
Uh-huh.
lot of people to be put in that situation and expected to eat a full bowl of this mystery food. Put yourself in your kids' food
Mhm,
or in your kids' shoes
mhm,
to you. It might just be pesto on
mhm,
pasta. It's no big deal. But to your kid, it could be a completely new, different
mhm.
set of flavors and experience. So just allowing your child to explore that food through taste, touch, smelling. I know with a lot of feeding therapy, if it's really, more of a clinical situation on getting kids to, because I know several kids that have gone through food allergies, swallowing problems,
Mm,
difficulty with health concerns related to nutrition at a very young age. It really creates this aversion to trying new food. Like it truly is like a clinical situation.
yeah,
And kisses to the food, like touching the
yeah,
food to your lip and just like putting it back down. And again, creating that safe space where they are not expected to eat the whole,
yeah,
plate or whatever. And then also offering that maybe you're not ready for that flavor yet, or maybe you
yeah.
would like it prepared in a different way. We'll try it again later. So
Mhm,
leaving that open instead of saying, oh, you don't like carrots or you don't like peaches, like
right.
just saying that to the child really reinforces, oh, I don't like that food instead of maybe you'd like it a different way, or maybe we'll try it again later. Maybe your taste buds aren't ready for that yet.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. And that's one that my girls have really grabbed a hold of. That's been really helpful for uh, the curiosity and exploration element is like taste change,
yeah,
and you don't have to like this now, but they'll sometimes be presented with foods and like, oh, let me see if I like it now. Let's try it out and see. And there's no pressure there.
yep,
There's no forcing, there's no demanding, there's setting your kid up for this. Um, you can explore foods, and that can be a fun thing. Food doesn't have to be pressure and stress and obligation, But I really like that one that maybe you're not ready for that flavor. Maybe you don't like it
yeah,
now, but let's try it again later.
yep,
Maybe your tastes have changed, and that one works really well with Sophie, at age 6. She's like, oh yeah, maybe they have changed. Let's see.
maybe.
It's almost
I
kind of like
know.
fun. Like, oh, I wonder if
Yeah.
they did. Do I like it
Yeah.
now? Nope, I don't like it. Okay, let's try it again.
Nope, but I tried.
Let's try it again
I
later.
still I still do that. I still try foods occasionally and I'm like, yeah, no, still not liking it.
Hmm.
And I've given it a fair shot in my adult years, still not my flavor.
Yeah.
So I hope that this discussion has been
Hmm.
helpful for everyone and that we've given you some ideas of things you can say and approaches you can make without being, instilling fear in your child and
Hmm.
and showing yourself a little bit of grace too as a
Hmm.
parent.
Yeah. And shedding the fear that you have for your child and their
Mm,
nutrition and their health. Like, if you're doing your best, you're going to be fine. Like,
yep.
it's there are so many things you can feed your kid, and they're going to be just fine. And you do not need to operate out of places of fear around this. Like, your kid's going to be good.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right.
So, um, thank you so much for listening. Do we do a meaning in the mundane on these ones?
I
On a
feel
mini
like we
pod?
have,
Okay. I
haven't
have
we?
one real
I
quick to
have one
share.
too. Let's do
Yeah.
it.
Okay, let's go.
Okay.
I went for a walk the other evening because it was not 1,000 degrees and Matt was off doing something else. So I just went by myself and it was like, I don't know, 8:30. And I got down kind of to this like dead end area with all these houses in our neighborhood. And there's like really big properties back there. So like woods, lawns, and I look over and I see this buck grazing, a young
Mm,
buck. It was like, I think it was probably a 3 point and it had like the velvet on the antlers. So it's over
that's
there grazing.
cool.
And I'm like, very cool. So I look at the buck and enjoy that. And then I walk around like I'm going to turn around and go back. And I look in an adjacent property and there's a little baby doe over there, or fawns, excuse me, with a little spot still on it by itself, just like sits down in the grass and just looking at me with his big old ears. And I'm like, oh my gosh, a baby, So I sit there and watch that for a while.
Yeah.
And then I like come back out through the neighborhood and I'm walking down the road and I just happen to look over through these trees and there was a mama, definitely a doe, with a very young fawn down between her legs, like standing there under her, just like
Wow.
watching me. And oh my gosh, I about melted. I mean, just it had to be like a really late season birth because
Mm,
it looked like it was only a couple weeks old. It was tiny.
little bitty,
And I
huh?
was just like, oh my gosh, this is, and if I hadn't have just gotten bored and gone for a walk and
Yeah,
taken that route, I wouldn't have seen like all of this really cool, wildlife. So
that's
it's
fun.
very fun. And then
Heck
I
yeah.
tried to take Matt to go find it the other night and we couldn't find him. I'm like, I promise they're here. I
I'm
have it
not
on
just
video.
making things up.
Yeah.
That's awesome. For me, this was just a couple nights ago, maybe last night actually. Um, I was putting Sophie to bed and was laying in bed and we read some stories and sang some songs and I was getting ready to leave and she goes, no, snuggle me a little bit. And I was like, okay.
Oh.
So 5 minutes, I was like, okay, I'm gonna go. She's like, no, not yet. A few minutes later, I'm like, okay, no, not yet. I'm like,
Oh gosh.
okay, this is fine.
Yeah.
Do I have something more important to
Ask me.
do?
Yeah,
No,
exactly.
no, this is about the most important thing.
Twist my arm.
Yeah. And so I just laid there and I could feel like her body relax and her breathing
Oh.
change, and she's nestled in my arm and my arms around her. And she fell asleep there. And it had been a while since I had held her or laid with her till she went to sleep. And it was just like, man, you always wonder as a parent, like, is this the last time I get to do this? Is this the
I
last
was
time?
just thinking that. Yes.
And so for me, it was like, okay, well, this may be the last time, but the last time wasn't. Like, I got to do it again.
Oh,
So I'm
yeah.
good. It was a pretty great moment.
Oh, you're such a good dad. How
Yeah.
cute. I love
Oh,
it.
thanks. All
Okay,
right.
everyone. Thank you
Thank you,
for
everybody.
listening.
Yeah.
Hopefully, this month's topic has been helpful and maybe go unfollow some of those icky accounts that are making you feel like shit.
Unfollow the ick. Yep.
Yeah.
All right.
And we'll catch you next time.
Thanks, everybody.